As a search and rescue officer, you go out to all kinds of cases, from animal bites to heart attacks. This case got called in early in the morning, from a young couple who were up on one of the trails that goes by the lake. The husband was completely hysterical, and we couldn't really figure out what was going on. We could hear the woman screaming in the background, and he was begging us to come out there right away. When we got there, we see him holding his wife, and she has something in her arms. She's screaming these awful, almost animal-like screams, and he's sobbing. He sees us and screams for us to help them, to please get an ambulance up there. Now, obviously, we can't drive an ambulance up on a walking path, so we asked him if his wife needs help, or if she can walk on her own. He's still hysterical, but he manages to tell us that it's not his wife that needs help. I go over while one of the other vets tries to calm him down, and I ask the wife what's going on. She's rocking, holding something, and just shrieking, over and over. I crouch down to see whatever she's holding, and it's covered in her blood. That's when I notice a sling in her front, and my heart sinks. I ask her to tell me what's going on, and I sort of pry her arms gently open, so I can see what she's holding. It's her baby, obviously dead. His head's caved in on one side, and he's covered in scratches. Now, I've seen dead bodies before, but something about this whole situation hits me hard. I have to take a second to compose myself, and I get up and go to one of the other vets, who's standing by. I tell him that it's a dead kid, and he sort of pats my shoulder, and tells me that he'll deal with it. It took us over an hour to get this woman to let us see her kid. Every time we try to take him from her, she flips out and tells us we can't have him, that he'll be okay if we just leave her alone and let her help him. But eventually, one of the vets manages to calm her down, and she gives us the body. We took it back to the med area, but when the EMTs showed up, they told us that there was never any hope for saving the child. He's dead instantly from trauma to his head. I was good buddies with one of the nurses who met them at the hospital, and she told me later what had happened. Turns out, the couple had been walking with the baby in the sling. They stopped because the kid was fussing. The dad takes the kid and is holding him, looking out over this little gully by the path. The mom comes up to stand next to him, but she ends up stepping on a loose patch of soil, and she trips. She falls into the dad, who drops the kid, who ends up falling about 20 feet down to this little gully, into the rocks at the bottom. The dad climbed down to recover the kid, but he's fallen right on his head, and was dead by the time he got there. The baby was only about 15 months old. It was a total freak accident, a series of events that coalesced into the worst possible outcome. Probably one of the most awful calls I've ever been on. One summer, there was a series of awful storms that blew down a lot of trees, and set one part of the forest a few miles behind my house on fire. Fire crews got it under control, but some of them came back not quite the same. It was like they had been to war. You could tell they had gotten really scared because they had the same looks on their faces. I think it's called shell shock. My friend and I said they looked like Walking Dead people. They didn't smile or anything if we went up to them, and most of them left town as soon as everything was over. I asked my parents about it, but they said they didn't know what I was talking about. Once everyone was told the woods were safe again, my friend and I decided to try to hike out to where the fire had been. We didn't tell our parents where we were going, and it was pretty exciting to think that we were disobeying them like that. We hiked out about 2 miles or so, and we started seeing burnt trees and stuff. I remember my friend got really upset because we found the skeleton of a deer curled up under a tree, and I practically had to drag her away. She wanted to bury it, but I didn't want her touching it because the antlers were really weird. I can't remember why. I just remember thinking there was something wrong about them, and I didn't want either of us going near it. The farther up we went, the more burnt everything got. Eventually, there were no standing trees. It was like being on another planet. Almost nothing green, just brown and black everywhere. We were standing there looking at it all, and we both heard someone shouting in the distance. I panicked because I thought it was my dad, and that he was going to tell me I was grounded. My friend broke off and went to hide behind a big rock because she said she didn't want to get caught out there. Her parents had forbidden her to come out in the woods at all, and she'd lied to them and told them we were going to a movie. I followed her, and we kept listening. I could hear this voice getting closer, and I realized that they were calling for help. I thought maybe it was some hiker who had gotten lost and needed directions back to town. That used to happen all the time, so I was used to helping people out. I heard him following my voice, so I kept calling out until I saw him running in the distance. He got closer, and I could see that his face was all red. I told my friend to give me her pack, because she had a first aid kit. She made this noise like she was grossed out, and she asked me if I'd seen his face. I told her to shut up, and I jogged up to meet him. I stopped about halfway, and when I saw him stopped in front of me, I could see that his nose and lips and part of his forehead were all gone. It was like they'd been sliced clean off. He was bleeding bad, and I saw that the knees of his pants were red too. I took a step back, but I was too scared to move much, and he grabbed my shoulders. It felt like I got a shock, and he jerked back. He started babbling, and I couldn't tell what he was saying, except that he kept asking me how long he'd been gone. He asked me where his unit was, but I just shook my head. He looked me over and saw my Walkman, and he screamed. He just kept babbling and touching his face, and I realized that he wasn't wearing the right clothes. He had some kind of weird gray cloth jacket and almost formal pants on, and the jacket had those weird buttons and red borders on it. I kept shaking my head and told him I couldn't understand what he was saying. I went to open the first aid kit, but he just screamed at me and said the only thing I could really understand. "Don't touch me! You'll make me go back there!" After that, he ran off, and I could hear him screaming the whole time. When I couldn't hear him anymore, I turned around, and my friend was crying. I just turned around and started walking back to town. She asked me over and over what had happened, and who that was, but I didn't say anything. When we got home, I told her I didn't want to play in the woods with her anymore. We're still friends, but we didn't talk about that guy. Not ever. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved the search of a young woman who had gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, we had curled up under a large rotting log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking us why the man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing weird noises coming from all around us. It was like coughing, but it was more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within the sight of the base ops, the woman turns to me. Her eyes were about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I have a very small scar at the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden by my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says this, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear. I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was. But I have to say, I was really happy when we left the area that night. On just about every case where you're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point, we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your home, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and the other officer just told me not to worry about it, and it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told, very emphatically, that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now when I run into them, because it happens so frequently.